What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, March 18th, 2019, getting on through the month here and start of a brand new week. We've got a lot to talk about. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And I'm going to start off here with a little bit of an apology. I, over the weekend, messed up my left arm, and so I'm not at my best right now, but we're going to do the show. We're going to get through it somehow. And but I'm moving a little bit slow. That's all I'm going to say here. Okay, obviously everybody's still talking about that situation, that horrible tragedy down in New Zealand. Everybody's pointing fingers every single way that they can. Everybody's trying to take advantage of it to push whatever agenda they're pushing here. And it's almost become a circus in and of itself. Out in Hollywood, some of the liberals are out there saying, this is all President Donald Trump's fault. You know, that Donald Trump, apparently flew down there on Air Force One and gave this guy all those guns or something. I don't know exactly what they're saying. But here's the issue. The liberals are saying the shooter was a conservative. The conservatives are saying the shooter was a liberal. If you read his manifesto, he makes it clear he's not a Trump supporter. And, he basically indicates support for some leftist causes like the environment. Now his manifesto kind of bounces back and forth across the aisle, but it's kind of hard to get a read on the guy, let alone definitively say, oh, he's a conservative, he's this, he's that here. And a lot of people are saying, well, ultimately the problem is that you've got all this unfettered immigration, and the local people are very resentful of it, and that is a probable cause of what's going on here. Now, the officials are out there trying to find something to blame, but they won't blame the immigration and they won't halt it. Rush Limbaugh came on out saying that this was a false flag, that the shooter was a leftist who staged the attack to frame conservatives. And that, I think, is a little bit out there. And again, if you read this guy's manifesto, he's kind of between. He espouses some conservative views, some liberal views. He's not hardcore one side or the other. Now, New Zealand is already out there saying that they're going to push for more gun control, even though they don't know where the shooter got his guns. But it's emerged so far that Brenton Tarrant was able to get a Category A gun license in November of last year, and he's just started legally purchasing the guns a month later. And it's another reminder about all this talk about background checks. They don't work. Because this guy just sailed on through. They're saying there were no red flags. And New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is saying our gun laws will change. Now, they have backed off, saying that they're going to ban all semi-automatic weapons. Apparently, there was a huge pushback, especially from people in New Zealand who are into ranching and farming, and they need these kind of weapons to varmint their fields and farms here. Over on MSNBC's Joe Scarborough went to Twitter to say he's in favor of a ban on the AR-15 because it's a, quote, weapon of war that was far deadlier than the M16 used in Vietnam. Needless to say, Second Amendment experts like Stefan Gutowski basically jumped on him and said, no, of course not. The M16 is far more lethal. The AR-15 was never intended to be used as a weapon of war. It's a sporting rifle. It's a target weapon. It's a varminting gun. It's a home defense weapon. Now, one of the weirdest things about this whole Christchurch shooting is how social media, the internet, is literally being scrubbed of all the raw material. And Facebook said it has already removed 1.5 million copies of the video that was live streamed by the shooter during the mosque attacks. And they took these 1.5 million just in the first 24 hours. And apparently now they're blocking uploads. And Facebook said it also removed all edited versions of the video that do not show graphic content, supposedly out of respect for the people affected by the mosque shooting and the concerns of local authorities. I think it's more that latter one, because I'm not the only one who's suspicious about this. Over at Natural News, they've got a headline: what are they trying to hide? Because there's a lot of violent videos on the net. But now possessing a copy of the New Zealand mosque shooting video can get you 10 years in prison. And they've already arrested an 18-year-old man for merely sharing the live stream video of the Christchurch shooting. Now, the video has been classified by the Chief Censor's Office as objectionable, which means anyone in possession of the video of the shootings could be in serious trouble. They could face imprisonment, which basically means that linking to content the government doesn't approve of is now a crime in New Zealand. Now, there are videos out there with a lot of mass murder. Look at any of the videos being streamed from places like Syria or Iraq or Yemen. I mean, the U.S. government, NATO, they constantly live stream their mass murder videos. Nobody says anything about that. But on this one, it feels very wanky that they're trying to just make this video go away. So anyway, this 18-year-old man was arrested. He's been charged with publishing objectionable publications in the week prior to the attacks, including a photo of the mosque with the words "target identified" and messages inciting extreme violence. And it's a very weird situation. And you need to understand, the story has mutated, because when the reports first came out, if you'll remember, the authorities said they arrested 4 people, 3 men and a woman, and they found improvised explosive devices attached to the attackers', plural, vehicles, plural. This was quoted by Associated Press. And now the official narrative, which you will believe if you're a loyal patriot, is that this 28-year-old Brenton Tarrant murdered 50 people and injured scores of others, all by himself. And it's starting to feel really wanky. Now, apparently, this New Zealand mosque shooting suspect visited Israel back in 2016. Using his Australian passport. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network and getting into other parts of the world. There was a story that came on out that the United States is planning to leave almost 1,000 troops in Syria. And this came from the Wall Street Journal. That said, as talks with Turkey, U.S.-backed Kurdish forces and European allies have failed to produce a deal on a safe zone, the U.S. now intended to keep working with Kurdish fighters in the country. Well, this is now being denied by the United States government, who is saying, no, there'll be 200 troops left behind, but that's really it. And the Wall Street Journal article is factually incorrect. This is coming from General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay. Meanwhile, Damascus is accusing the United States and allies of war crimes in Syria. And the Syrian Foreign Ministry responded to the statement issued by the U.S.-led coalition partners that refused to take part in reconstruction, noting that these states are not invited to contribute to the reconstruction after those war crimes committed against the Syrian people. And they said these countries that killed and destroyed have never been interested in the reconstruction of Syria, and they are not invited to contribute to the reconstruction. These states should only pay compensations for the killing and destruction committed as a result of their heinous crimes and stop their blatant interference in internal affairs. And Syria is right to do that, because if you look at the reconstruction of Iraq, it was just rife with corruption. The money poured on in. The few buildings and facilities that were built are already crumbling and falling apart. There was one police station they were building. They didn't even have it finished before it started to fall apart. It was just a ripoff. Meanwhile, Russia has deployed updated Sukhoi 25 attack aircraft to contain the Idlib militants. And basically, they're going to be operating near Jizreen, Mohammedia, El Aftaris, El Nashabia, and Marj al-Sultan, where a notable number of weapons and equipment was abandoned by the militants after the defeat suffered there from the Syrian army last year. And many of the, according to, and I'm waiting, okay, good, we're reconnected. Welcome back to our show here. Venezuela has been hit with yet another massive electric blackout. Reason behind the outage unknown, but suspected to be outside interference yet again. The blackout is reported mainly by the inhabitants of East Caracas, and basically where you've got the hotels, foreign embassies, and it looks like it's just cyber war. All right, we're going to take a caller. Rolly in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Paul, I was doing a show Thursday night, and the interviewer asked me how I feel about the massacre that went on in New Zealand, because it was Thursday night, where I was at, Friday morning, in New Zealand itself. And, yeah, it's just amazing, like, how fast these things go, and it almost seems like a couple days ago. But, Mike, I've been trying to use some critical thinking about, like, what happened. And Richard Hewer talked about the double hypothesis, the analysis of competing hypotheses, and it really can't be like a false flag or a hoax. It's either one or the other, or some sort of like media trickery, at foot, something they haven't told us. So it's one of those three, it's more than just double. And it just seems very odd that there was a ready-made, tailor-made manifesto. They had ready-to-go legislation to go ahead and pull out and rapid fire out, Port Arthur style. And they already send a message to their citizens, don't continue to send out posts about Facebook, but they've already had a trial, like, just starting for 18-year-old boy. And CNN and the mainstream media say that the objective of the live shooter was trying to provoke a race war, but they've been fanning flames of hatred for a while.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if you look at all this anti-Muslim propaganda that's been going on in the media, I mean, certainly the people putting that out have to share the blame.
And you hit the nail on the head, like CNN puts out like war footage all the time. I remember when Brian Williams, said that the bombs going off in Syria look very beautiful, and it said it reminded him of a Leonard Cohen song. Absolutely gut-wrenching that he would actually say something so erroneous as that. And definitely the liberals, maybe it was, like Rush Limbaugh says, it was a leftist that staged the whole event. I don't know personally, but there's definitely something afoot, and the lefties are not going to let a good tragedy go to waste. They're following the commandments of Saul Alinsky on that one.
Yeah, they are. Well, everybody is. It's not just the lefties. Everybody is exploiting this for whatever their particular agenda is. The gun grabbers are going ballistic. Yeah, the Hollywood liberals are blaming Donald Trump. I mean, the fingers are pointing in all directions on this. And as the original raw data gets scrubbed from the web, all that's going to be left are all these various official interpretations of what happened.
And like for me, like I'm not going to say like automatically what happened because I wasn't on the ground. I really don't know. I think that the images that we saw were a little bit shoddy. And like I just want somebody that's an official, that's intelligent, that's willing to speak to me and tell me exactly what happened. Like, for example, I wonder, like, what happened to the cartridges when he shot outside of the mosque itself, for an example. And if they could, like, explain that to us, that would be great. That would behoove me, greatly, the citizen population, instead of massive confusion about what happened.
Well, I imagine that the shells, just fell into the grass. Is probably what happened there. I don't think this was, a total fake the way Sandy Hook was, but I think this guy. I mean, given that there were no red flags, I mean, this guy seemed to come from money. His passport shows he used to travel all over the place. Apparently, he had a very good life, and then all of a sudden, he just decides to go on this rampage. And he's obviously been planning it since last November when he got his Category A gun license, and he just started buying guns. Like, he had a lot of guns in that car, and why that didn't catch anybody's attention, I don't know. But again, what we're dealing with here is not a gun problem, but an individual problem. I want to know if this guy was taking prescription antidepressants.
Right, Michael, absolutely. I did read his manifesto itself. I might have a little bit of insight into the whole, Candace Owens thing if you're interested.
Okay.
For me to tell you about.
Yep.
Okay. So he says that he idolizes Candace Owens, something to that extent. And there could have been several possibilities why he said that. First one, not rule out he is a troll. He did post a lot of his information, on 8chan and 4chan servers. So maybe it was just a joke. Another thing is Candace Owens actually retweeted something that Muammar Gaddafi said in 1947 or 1975. And it's the quote, "We have 50 million Muslims in Europe. There are signs that Allah will grant Islam victory in Europe without swords, without guns, without conquest. We will turn it into Muslim continent within decades." And she sent this out to Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of the Greater City of London.
Yes.
So, she was talking about, the Muslim invasion. That's one possibility. She's also... a lot of people accuse her of being pro-Trump as well. But, of course, the live-action shooter really wasn't pro-Trump himself. He mentioned in the manifesto, the idea of Trump is good, but his policies are terrible, according to him.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Candace actually put out a tweet saying that she's going to go Colombian coveting Catholic lawsuit on CNN if they don't back off of linking her to New Zealand, which I agree with.
Yeah. Well, one of the labels they've been putting on this New Zealand shooter is white supremacist, and here we've got him admiring this, very lovely black lady. And so, like I said, everybody is trying to milk this for their own agenda. The actual facts be gosh darned.
Yep, and what's your opinion about the Prime Minister of New Zealand? I've watched a couple of press statements that she made about the horrific incidents. She calls it horrific herself, and she's wearing a hijab, and I think she's been wearing it since the incident to show solidarity. I'm not sure if that shows weakness. I don't know, how I feel about it subconsciously, because I do respect Muslims, in general. But for some people that are angry, that might be a sign that you're giving in to foreigner demands. People that feel like New Zealand has thrown them overboard. I don't really know about the psychology of the makeup of people down under. I really don't talk to them much, but that seems to be a stance they have.
Well, it may be to show solidarity, but you're right. Probably a lot of the locals are saying it's a sign of weakness and a sign of the Islamization of New Zealand. Anyway, listen, Raleigh, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm dubious of the video of the New Zealand shooting for a couple different reasons. One is that even in a narrow hallway, the AR-15 discharge sounds about the same as it does outside, and that mimics the eyewitnesses of a lot of these supposed mass shootings where they say it was like pop, 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 or firecrackers going off. But if you've ever heard an AR-15 discharged inside a building, and in that narrow hallway especially, it would be loud enough to hurt your ears. It's just so incredibly loud. Number two, people hunt with AR-15s at 500 yards and more, but at close range and almost point blank with some of the victims, it would leave an exit wound about the size of a tangerine. And the walls.
Well, that depends on the round. If it's an FMJ, then you're going to have a small exit wound.
Well, water can't be compressed, so there's like a funnel of damaged tissue inside the body.
Yes.
The big end is the exit wound. But the walls are like brilliant white. They're not even off-white like most American homes. So, but there's not like one tiny little spot of blood. There would be, the heart is a powerful organ, and you don't just, these people just fall over like mannequins. Many people survive terrible injuries and still are moving about, but all these people, or most of them, they just fall over like they were inert. Number three, if this is real, there is no way this guy, that he was new to killing people. He goes about it with all the excitement of going grocery shopping. When you go out to harm somebody, it's like a young black guy who robs a liquor store for the first time. Your anticipation of it builds up adrenaline that makes you sick, but he's just as cool as a cucumber. If this is real, I have to believe he's killed before on several occasions at least. But,
now I myself have not seen the video, and I'll probably take a look at it at some point. But just the fact that the video is being erased from social media, they're clamping down on it just as hard as they can. Now, fortunately, New Zealand doesn't have jurisdiction over the rest of the world, so the rest of the world has got the video. They're looking at it, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of experts looking at it and analyzing it. But if the points you make are valid, then yeah, we've got another fake.
Well, you can just look at videos of massacres where firearms were used, and there's just blood everywhere. I think if this was real, there would be so much blood on the walls it would look like somebody went around with a bug sprayer filled with blood, But anyway, that's about all I had for you. Keep up the good work. All
right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. Again, it's very suspicious that the government of New Zealand is just trying very hard to make this video go away. And Facebook is trying to make it go away, and unfortunately Facebook is global. They're trying to make this video go away. They don't want people looking at it for some reason, and I don't think it's just because it's, people being shot, because there are videos of people being shot all over Facebook and YouTube, especially from the war zones. So I agree this is very, very suspicious. Okay, getting on back down now to Venezuela. There was an interesting article in fortrus.com, and they in turn are citing the Mexican press in saying adios Guido, and they're basically saying you need to understand the people of Venezuela are very tough and they're very resilient. They've been fueled by almost 2 decades of fierce hostility from the United States, its allies, and its lackeys. It's been attacked with economic war, media war, now the electric war, in the context of continuous coup tactics and hybrid warfare. But Venezuela continues to emerge victorious and with high morale. Now, the fact of the matter is that the attempt to trigger a coup d'etat against Maduro, led by Guido, has fallen flat on its face. Now they're trying these blackouts to see if they can get the people to knuckle under and get rid of Maduro and welcome Guido. And it's an ugly situation, and I have tremendous sympathy for the people of Venezuela, what they're going through, what they're suffering through, all in the name of Venezuela's oil and what currency it's going to be sold in. Meanwhile, retired Brigadier General Anthony Tata was basically on TV talking about Maduro, saying he needs to understand that a bullet to the forehead may be his way out of Venezuela, and we have that capability. So now they're talking assassination. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And wars all over the place here. Story out of, let's see, mailchai.mp. Yemen, 4 years of British-enabled tragedy. We know there's a lot of players in there. Saudi Arabia is taking point, and a lot of people are saying it's Saudi Arabia's war. I don't think so. I think Saudi Arabia is acting as a proxy for the United States, because some years back there was a successful U.S. regime change in Yemen. They kicked out the legitimate government and imposed a new government, and the people of Yemen just didn't like living under puppet rule, and they kicked out the junta, and that's when all of a sudden Saudi Arabia just said, well, we've just got to go on and give these people what for. But this article is basically talking about just how destructive this Saudi war on Yemen continues to be, and it's backed, of course, by the United States and by Great Britain. Last week, 2 separate reports outlined the scale of brutality unleashed on the Yemeni people. A United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees report concluded that nearly 100 civilians were killed or injured in Yemen every week in 2018, whilst the preface of the Days of Judgment report from U.S.-based University Network for Human Rights and Yemeni monitoring group Watana spells out just how dire the situation is. In a country that was already among the poorest and most fragile in the region, 14 million people are now threatened by famine, and even more depend on humanitarian assistance. And while precise figures are lacking, an estimated 50,000 people have been killed as a direct effect of the wars, and 85,000 children may have died of hunger and preventable diseases. And as a confirmation of the UK involvement here, Russia Today is running an article saying that the British Royal Air Force is providing engineering support for the British-supplied aircraft operated by the Royal Saudi Air Force. The bombers. The bombers are supplied by Britain. They're being maintained by Britain and responsible for killing innocent people in Yemen. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Robert in Ontario. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'll just be a minute. I understand. I read something. Sorry, I read something regarding the fact that possibly John Podesta and Hillary were in New Zealand 5 days before this happened. I don't know if it's true or not.
I heard about Podesta possibly being down there. I hadn't heard anything about Hillary. And again, we don't really know for sure. I think what's going on here,
the lake, eh?
You know, it's beginning to, I mean, between the suppression of the video, I mean, with an iron fist across the entire globe, and I'm getting a sense there's a lot of stuff being thrown out about what happened in New Zealand to maximize the confusion so that people can't really analyze what little raw data remains to figure out what happened.
Right. Okay. I don't have nothing else, Mike. It's just sad to see, that's all, the whole thing, whether it's true or not.
Yeah, it is sad to see, and I guess at some point I'm going to have to look at that video, you know, through my filmmaker's eyes and see if it looks real or not. Of course, that's what got me into trouble all the way back in 1994. Anything else, Robert?
I'm sorry. I don't know if you're familiar with Oli Demigard, who has a website called Light on Conspiracies. He's been studying these things for dozens of years.
Yes.
Very good. He's going to be doing a thing today. He's on the air on Jason Goodman's program.
Okay.
All right, Mike, thanks for your time.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay. Over in Serbia, they're having what we're told is a color revolution there as well. And apparently the protesters have stormed the presidential offices, at least through to the lobby, and the police are maintaining security without problems. But apparently more than 1,000 protesters gathered in front of the presidential offices where a press conference was being held. And the protesters attempted to break through the fence around the residence. French President Macron is out there banging the gong, if you will, over China's presence in Africa. Oh, we can't have China in Africa. And it's really all about containing the wealth and which direction it's going to go, because Africa is the last great reservoir of unexploited, undeveloped natural resources. And obviously the West wants it to be theirs, whereas countries like Russia and China understandably want access to those raw materials as well. And we're sort of past the age where people simply go on in and bid for them, and the highest bidder wins. And now we're fighting over these resources. And basically, you see all these Western leaders smiling, shaking hands, and offering sage advice on tours of Africa. And it's hypocritical. It's very hypocritical. You just look at the history of Africa's exploitation in the past. It's happening all over again. Alrighty, in Spain, the Catalonia pro-independence protesters are marching in Madrid, and more than 60 political collectives from Catalonia and other parts of Spain are heading to the nation's capital aboard 400 chartered buses and are expected to gather and march between Atocha and Plaza de Cibeles. And they're marching under the banner, "Self-determination is not a crime." No, it isn't. It is a human right recognized by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Over in Israel, there has been yet another storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, this one mostly involving foreign tourists from the United States. And so you had these Jewish settlers of American origin storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque courtyards, and they were under heavy protection of the occupation forces. And the settlers performed religious rituals and provoked the Muslim and Palestinian worshippers. Meanwhile, occupation forces deployed all around the mosque from the early hours of the morning and tightened restrictions imposed on the entry of Palestinians. So there's an interesting reversal. The illegal settlers get to come and go, and the Muslims are basically being discouraged from attending here. Now, Israeli settlers are carrying out these raids on Alaska on an almost daily basis. They're always accompanied by heavily armed Israeli military police who impose restrictions on the Palestinian and Muslim worshippers, with many banned from entering the holy site for months at a time as a result of their rejection of Israeli settler desecration of the area. So this is a deliberate policy of provocation. Now, here's a very interesting story. This came out of Middle East Monitor here. And it says the Israeli occupation army has proposed a plan to reoccupy the Gaza Strip during any future offensive. Al-Khalij Online reported this on yesterday. And the plan was approved 14 years after Israel's unilateral disengagement from the coastal enclave. I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Because 14 years ago, when Israel magnanimously gave the Gaza Strip back to the Palestinians, it was done as part of this little deal that the Palestinians would get the Gaza Strip and the world would turn a blind eye to the illegal settlements being built in the West Bank. And I predicted back then, as soon as those settlements were facts on the ground and could not be removed, Israel would take Gaza back over, and it looks like it's getting ready to happen right now. Okay, we're going to take another phone call from Joe in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. It's very fitting that France would be upset about the Chinese in Africa. I worked offshore in oil and gas, and our boat, we went into Morocco and Senegal, and we were drilling off Mauritania. And it's all like French. If you want to buy a phone card, it's all through French Maritel or whatever it was.
Yes.
And, you know, if you want to get food, it all comes through France. So although, like, they talk about colonization being over, it isn't. All your airplanes going in and out, you got to fly through Paris. And people, you know, don't realize it, but Africa's still under colonial power. You know, they all have what would you call it? Franchises, I guess.
Yes.
For French companies and America. You know, I'm sure the British are down more in South Africa and their former colonies. The Portuguese might even still be in there. But you know, I did see a ton of the Chinese, you know, buildings and cement factories and other things in Mauritania. And I did notice also on the flights out there, there were a lot of like high and tight haircut military guys from Fort Bragg and Georgia and other places all flying into our big embassy there. So yeah. I think, you know, they realize that that's the new battleground is China and Africa. And in a way, I don't blame the Africans for going with the Chinese because, you know, what good is going with the European and the American powers have gotten them, you know? Yeah. I know a lot of Nigerian people, and they're like, you know, they feel like they've been raped by the oil companies with the government's tacit approval, you know, Shell and BP and them just, you know, rape those countries of their resources and pollute and stir up rebellions amongst the different tribes and religions. So, you know, I can't really say I blame the Africans for looking for a Chinese savior, although I think the Chinese will abuse them as bad or worse. I can see why they would after, you know, so many years of being brutalized and basically raped of their resources by the West. And they still are, like I said, even now, like I said, if you want to get a phone, it's not an African phone system. It's all a Maritel, I think it was, or so it's just, that's just the reality of the situation. But it is fitting to hear Macron moaning about it because it is a very lucrative thing for the French. And what else do the French really have, you know? The other thing, this whole New Zealand shooting is such a farce. Like Sandy Hook, you know, they start taking down videos and threatening people with jail. I mean, right after Sandy Hook, remember the head of the state police said you'll be arrested for asking questions and all that.
Well, he didn't say you'd be arrested, but he said absolutely, you know, you shouldn't be listening to any conspiracy theories. I don't think he threatened people with arrest for that. But in this case, New Zealand is saying anybody who even just has the video on their hard drive, even if they're not sharing it or streaming it, just having the video on their hard drive, they can go to jail.
You know, there are, you know, and they learn their lesson from like Building 7 with 9/11. And you just, whenever I talk to people about 9/11, all I say is, well, just explain Building 7 to me. And the same way with Sandy Hook. When they want to talk about Sandy Hook, I said, well, explain David Wheeler, the sloppy FBI sniper. You know, that's, and all the videos, most of the YouTube videos that I used to share about the sloppy sniper, David Wheeler, they've all come down. There's very few of them left. But, I mean, all you got to do is have a picture of this guy in his sniper outfit, right? Yep. Carrying the weapons and then him testifying in front of Congress and say, what's with this? You know, it's the same thing as Building 7. And I'm sure if we got a chance to really analyze this shoot 'em up in New Zealand, there'd be similar things, and they don't want that to happen because they know how powerful that is to people that think for themselves.
Yeah, there are you know, there are a lot of experts out here on the internet who are probably going to be looking at that, and there definitely is reason to look at that. But as I admitted to the earlier caller, I myself have not looked at the video yet, and I also find the timing of this convenient. Because, you know, the whole issue with the Jews in the Democratic Party,
with the anti-Semitism and these new pro-Palestinian Arabs coming in. The one boogeyman that Jews fear the most, and they've had it drummed into them, is Hitler and white nationalism. And so when I see this whole New Zealand thing, it's just wrapped up in such a nice little bow, timing-wise, to demonize, white nationalism. I think part of it is to try to get the Jews, who are a very powerful group of people in all different aspects, finance, media, you name it, back on the reservation, because I think a lot of them were being upset and alarmed by what was happening in the Democratic Party. So I would say that this false flag, definitely, that's one of the major benefits to the establishment of it. They want to. It's just like the Democrat. They want to keep the Jews on the Democratic plantation, and I think that's a big part of it.
Well,
another
big part of it, of course, is the timing relative to the revelations coming out from Judicial Watch, where the judge has finally said, yeah, people are going to have to talk about that email system and what was going on with that. And you definitely are, Hillary certainly doesn't want that to happen. She doesn't want the corporate media to be covering that, which is why we're going to be covering that. And New Zealand makes a good distraction. So the corporate media, they're just completely obsessed with that right now. And they're not reporting on anything else that's going on.
Well, as they usually do, though, these things have been the things that have been happening over the last 3 years. Everything they do backfires on them. It's funny. I don't know if there's like some kind of force in the universe that's just causing a boomerang effect. But I think this is going to actually empower white nationalism. I'm a white nationalist. I'm not I don't hate other races. I just like my white race, and I'm proud of our culture, and I'm a populist nationalist. And they can demonize me, by all they want. I don't care. And I think that the way they overreact, and they just, people say this is unfair. What is about white nationalism that they really fear so much that they would do something like this? And I think it's going to actually help white nationalists. It's just like I said, every time they come out, it's like with Trump, they bring out Cohen and it backfires on them, or they do the Kavanaugh and they do this. Everything has been backfiring on them, and I think this one's going to blow up in their face too. And
it very well might. Well, listen, Joe, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking about Israel. And apparently a parliamentarian in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition has urged authorities to end any hope of establishing a Palestinian state. So, member of the Knesset Moti Yogev of the Jewish Home Party declared, we must cut off any political hope for the establishment of a Palestinian state of murderers that has never existed and will never exist. And once again, they're repeating the big lie. Yes, there's a Palestinian state. It's on the maps going back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's very angry. Okay, we got some callers on the line. So let us go with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, if this New Zealand shooter is so right-wing racist, how come he visited Israel and Pakistan and all these other countries?
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and Mike, I watched the video, and he was a cool customer, man. I mean, I still stand by what I said. I think he was some kind of SAS or something. He played the British battle hymn while he was driving to the mosque.
That's rather interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, he shot out the side window. Well, he shot out through the side window and shot out through his windshield also. But it seemed like the other caller said, it was very natural for him to do this. Nothing bothered him, like he was a professional, and Mike, another thing is all these people saying, he manifesto and all that. Anybody can write anything they want, or somebody can write up something for them. So that's meaningless, really. You know,
it really is. But again, you know, another possible explanation for his detachment while shooting at people. Again, I want to know if he was on some kind of prescription antidepressant.
I mean, he could have been. I mean, we weren't all there, so we don't know. I'm just like, from what I watched the video a couple times, what I've noticed, you know, he didn't flinch or nothing. Like, had no problem with doing what he did. And like you said, there was those other people that they supposedly arrested, and I saw that with the IED, and yeah, you don't hear nothing about that ever since. It's almost like the same with the multiple shooters, and they only arrest one shooter. Same with, remember the casino shooting at the, what was it, the in Las Vegas?
Yes.
You know, the same thing. You know, it's just like, and that with Podesto going supposedly to New Zealand. I didn't hear a thing about Hillary going. I don't know if that's true. But
no, I hadn't heard anything about that as well. I remember all the way back Columbine, where they arrested 3 guys. You know, not including the 2 students who were found dead. They arrested 3 other guys. They went away. We never heard from them again either. All right. Well, listen, Dustin, do you have more? Do you want to stay over the station break?
Well, I just want to tell you real quick, Russia is putting Tu-22 backfire bombers in Crimea.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Paul in Montana. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mr. Rivero. A few years back on the alternative media, we were hearing about all of these huge internment camps. And one of the main champions of this internment camp was Alex Jones. And everywhere was popping up an internment camp here for 30,000, a camp there for 40,000, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, if these camps or internment, what have you, are really real, why are we not sticking all of these border jumpers into those camps? And I'll listen to you on the air.
Well, I think you raise a very good point. You know, did those so-called FEMA camps ever actually exist, or was it just more scare talk? But if they do exist, then you're absolutely right. They should be used to be collecting the illegal immigrants, the border jumpers, rather than this catch and release policy, which is just, it's an absolute disaster. They'll catch them coming across the border, and they'll say you have to show up at court at some point in the future, and they never show up at court. They just disappear into the population, and that's the end of it. And you're right. Either those internment camps don't really exist, or it could also be that there are simply too many illegal immigrants to put them in there, because there are a lot of illegal immigrants. And of course, the camps just sitting there is only half the problem, because then if you put the illegal immigrants in there, you have to start staffing it up with guards, bring in water, food, medical supplies, and so forth. So it's an ugly situation. Basically, the way that we solve the immigration problem is we start enforcing Title VIII. Anybody in the United States that aids, shelters, or employs an illegal immigrant gets to go to jail. You shut off the flow of free stuff, the flow of goodies, the illegal immigrants will stay home, because that's what's luring them here. Back home, they have to work for a living. They come up here, and as long as they vote Democratic, they're going to get free stuff. All right, the phone lines are now open, and we're going to get back to the news here. We're still talking about what's going on over in Israel. And apparently Israeli forces and the Israeli civil administration have now cut the water supply to 2,600 Palestinians living in communities in Bardala village in the Jordan Valley. And basically that's about 60% of the residents. And Israeli forces also cut off water supplies for 1,800 to 2,000 dunams. That's about little under 500 acres of Palestinian agricultural lands that must be continuously irrigated. So the crops that are on those plots of land, they're They're going to dry out and die. Now, Israel claims that water sources in the area are illegal. And, of course, the locals are saying that can't be true because the water comes from wells in the village and inside Palestinian lands. Okay. Now then. All righty. The Israeli military censor banned, partially redacted, more than 3,000 news items in 2018 and basically prohibited the publication of 363 news articles. So there's a lot of censorship going on over in Israel. And a lot of people are starting to ask, as growing awareness of what's going on in Palestine spreads among the population, they're saying, why isn't the corporate media reporting on this? And so there's this article over in Al Jazeera basically saying that the corporate media is just as compromised by Israel as the United States government. They're afraid of being called anti-Semites. They're afraid of losing their jobs. It really is. We're living under puppet rule here. Okay. Apparently, this AIPAC affiliate group, Citizens for a Nuclear-Free Iran, paid $60,000 to a group that engages in anti-Muslim extremism. And now, the Citizens for a Nuclear-Free Iran was launched in the summer of 2015 to rally opposition to the Iran deal. They paid the money to the Center for Security Policy, a Middle East policy news and analysis site, which has been cranking out anti-Muslim news ever since, which is gobbled up and regurgitated by the corporate media and some of the less enlightened independent media. So, if anti-Muslim sentiment was the motive for the New Zealand shooting, then AIPAC is at least partly to blame for creating that climate of anti-Muslim bigotry. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, the corporate foundations of Verizon, Pfizer, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, American Express, and JP Morgan Chase have collectively given over $25,000 to U.S. nonprofits that send money to the illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. Now, $25,000 isn't much, but still the optics on it are not very good. Charity begins at home, for one thing, and there's a lot of people in this country who need help. All right, there's an organization over in Germany called Jewish Voice for a Just Peace in the Middle East, and they received a peace prize from the city of Göttingen. And this organization supports the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. And, of course, the German Jews receiving this award triggered a firestorm of protest from prominent Jewish leaders saying, well, these are the wrong kind of Jews. They're self-hating Jews. They're anti-Semites. That you're not a real Jew unless you side with the agenda of crushing out Palestine. So apparently this is not the first time the organization is targeted for its Palestinian solidarity. Back in 2016, after an incitement campaign by the government of Israel and its local supporters, the bank account for the organization was closed. This was, in fact, the first time in the post-World War II era that an account held by a Jewish organization in Germany was closed. And it was explained to them it was for political reasons. If they would rescind their support for BDS, they could reopen the account. Only after a massive protest campaign was the account reopened. It's another reason not to keep your money in the banks here. I mean, even the banks are getting into this idea of weaponizing money, weaponizing your money. Yes, we have your money now, but we're not going to give it back until you swear allegiance to Israel, or you vote the straight Democratic ticket, or you do this, or you do that. Apparently, there has been another shooting and it's up in Utrecht, and it involves this 37-year-old Turkish-born Gökmen Tanis. He's the chief suspect. He did make his escape, but he opened fire on this tram, trolley car, if you will, and police are saying to stay away. Now, originally they said it was an act of terror. Now they've backed off. They think it may have actually been more of a personal dispute. South Korea is saying that there is no sign of an imminent North Korea missile launch. This is coming from South Korea's defense chief, and basically saying that, yes, they're refurbishing the facilities at the launch site, but there's no sign of any missiles actually being present, let alone being fueled and hoisted into position. Here in the United States, the head of Army Material Command said recently that he is putting a high priority on munitions readiness to make sure Army units are prepared for the next war. Basically, the wars we've already gone through apparently used up all the bullets. And so they're going on a buying spree. And this article actually says that Perna's comments come at a time when the Army continues to replenish its ammunition stocks as it prepares to face an equally formidable foe, such as Russia or China, on the battlefield. So that's where they're going. Meanwhile, over at the Air Force, they're asking for 4,400 more airmen and a new F-15EX fighter. That's in their new budget request. And they want more money for ongoing research programs such as the B-21 Long-Range Strike Bomber project. So it's just huge, huge amounts of money. Apparently these 8 F-15EX fighters will cost just slightly over $1 billion, and they're meant to replace the older F-15C and D Eagle fleet. Over in Great Britain, more than 10,000 military personnel, 35 warships, 5 submarines, and 59 aircraft and helicopters from 13 countries will take part in Exercise Joint Warrior until the 11th of April. And the aim of Joint Warrior is to allow the British Royal Navy, Army, Royal Air Force, and their allies to conduct joint operations involving different forces and units and against a range of current and future threats. Well, we know what they mean by the threat here. Article coming out of the Daily Mail. Watch out, Putin. Huge American B-52s that can carry nuclear weapons land at Royal Air Force Base as part of the largest U.S. bomber deployment to the UK since the Iraq War. And they had photos and videos, and look at these beautiful aircraft just, landing at the RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire. I think this brings the total number of these B-52s in Great Britain to 6, which is a lot. Okay, let me just get a little sip of water here. And let's get to the domestic politics. Okay, this is a story which I'm sure the corporate media is glad they've got New Zealand to report on, because they wouldn't want to report on this one. A federal judge has now ordered multiple senior Obama administration officials, State Department officials, and former Hillary Clinton aides Thursday to provide answers under oath to questions requested by Judicial Watch after a roughly 4-year court battle. Judicial Watch is doing the heavy lifting here. They've been fighting this for 4 years, and the judge finally said, yes, these questions do need to be asked. And under oath. So this could get very, very interesting. Colorado is now the 12th Democratic state to support ditching the Electoral College. And how they're going to get around the Electoral College. They can't change the Constitution. But all of these other states, these 12 states, they're passing measures to basically say whoever gets the popular vote gets all their Electoral College votes. It's a way of basically bypassing the Electoral College. And they're still throwing tantrums over Hillary's defeat. Now, the Electoral College prevents areas with massive populations, such as New York and California, from deciding who leads the rest of the country. And this is an attempt to destroy our electoral process simply because the Democrats to this day are incapable of accepting the words President Donald J. Trump. Now, former ESPN anchor Jamal Hill, infamous for anti-Trump tweets, says the Electoral College was created to preserve slavery. No, it wasn't, because the Electoral College was created when the nation was founded. And yes, slavery was legal back then, but it wasn't a widespread institution. It's just amazing here. I mean, if it's, popular vote, it's going to change the way campaigns are being run. If you live in a low population state, you will never see the candidates. They're going to be campaigning in the big cities, the urban centers, just getting the votes any way that they can. And they'll ignore everybody in flyover country. Now, back in 2016, it has to be remembered, Trump and Clinton knew going in what the rules were, including the Electoral College. And Trump designed his campaign around the reality of having to win the electoral vote, not the popular vote. And Hillary Clinton, when she lost, just threw a tantrum, wanted to go back and change the rules retroactively. Even tried to hijack the Electoral College, convince the electors, not to vote for Trump, but to vote for her. Very spiteful lady here. Alrighty, as you know, there's a big argument brewing over the excessive control that social media platforms are exercising, and they're showing rank discrimination. This is Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Apple, and Instagram. But apparently, newly appointed Trump judge, the Honorable Trevor McFadden, strained to dismiss, but without prejudice, the class action lawsuit from Freedom Watch and Laura Loomer. Now, Ms. Loomer is a conservative Jewish activist. She'd been banned from social media and PayPal over her strong views about Muslim Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's links to an association with Islamic groups like the Council for American Islamic Relations, the anti-woman and homosexual dogma Islam, and Omar's hatred of Jews in Israel, as well as her overt anti-Semitism. Well, again, they're trying to say that what Omar was saying about AIPAC was anti-Semitic. No, it isn't. And more people are standing up and saying that when you're criticizing a government, it is not a slur against the people of that country. It's criticism of a government. It's criticism of individuals within that government. Now, for some bizarre reason, and this gets back to what I said, be very careful about people who've got lots of gold plaques and trophies and all that stuff, because it's given to them to convince you should pay attention. And a good example of that is that CNN just received a First Amendment award, despite their constant lobbying of tech companies to ban InfoWars and other independent media. And Tucker Carlson basically took CNN to the woodshed, and their CEO, Jeff Zucker, for the absolute hypocrisy of getting a First Amendment award at the time they're trying to shut down freedom of speech all over the internet. Something funny is going on over at Fox News with Judge Jeanine Pirro. And last week, her show did not air. All Fox News will say is it was a scheduling conflict. She was preempted for reruns of some other ridiculous show. And she is not tweeting, so we don't know what's going on. But it may be a backlash from her not very well received comments regarding Ilhan Omar. So it's amazing there. Now, Trump is on the other side of this. He's out there saying, fight hard for Jeanine Pirro. And Trump is calling on Fox News to bring back the host after her weekly program didn't air. And apparently what Pirro said that may have been the cause of this is that the fact that Ilhan Omar wears a hijab means she follows Sharia law. I don't think that's an absolute. I don't think that's an absolute. But apparently, instead of her show, the network re-aired the documentary Scandalous, The Trial of William Kennedy Smith. I was wondering why they brought that one up. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And I think it would be appropriate at this time to extend our thanks to all those people who have been donating and continue to do so, because to be blunt about it, if you hadn't been donating, we wouldn't be here anymore. It is that tight. And Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com exist because of you, and of course exist for you, to keep you informed so you can make good choices. So once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. I thank you. We wouldn't be here without you. It really is that close. All right. Trump has basically stirred up a hornet's nest over the late Senator John McCain, and basically has prompted tweets by McCain's friends, family, and former colleagues trying to defend him and coming up with this idea, well, you know, he's dead now. We shouldn't say bad things about the dead. Well, I don't think being dead excuses your bad behavior. I mean, look how they're still railing about Adolf Hitler, and he's been dead for a very long time. But apparently what happened is that some court documents have surfaced confirming that McCain and one of his aides were involved in spreading that bogus Trump dossier that helped kick off all these ridiculous investigations. Now, Christopher Steele has admitted that the entire idea for the dossier came from a report published by CNN iReport. Now, you may remember this. CNN stopped doing this, but it was basically CNN's user-generated news site. And stories on iReport were submitted by citizen journalists, and they were not edited, fact-checked, or screened in any way before being published. You could put up a story there saying that the world had come to an end, and it would have gone right through. And Steele acknowledged under questioning that he'd used a July 28, 2009 report published on iReport to substantiate claims he made about internet hosting company Webzilla and its alleged Kremlin ties. However, he is insisting that he thought iReport boasted the same thorough journalistic standards as CNN, which is to say, not many at all, despite their First Amendment award here. Now, Donald Trump Jr. has authored an op-ed piece basically saying it's time to wake up. Conservatives face a tough fight as big tech's censorship expands. And he's saying our right to freely engage in public discourse through speech is under sustained attack, necessitating a vigorous defense against the major social media and internet platforms that are engaging in this bias. And he's talking about shadow bans, demonetization of YouTube videos, ads pulled for Republican candidates at the critical juncture of election campaigns. The list of violations against online practices and speech of conservatives is very, very long. And then he talks about how the fact that he recently discovered that Instagram was censoring his posts. He wrote a post about the Jussie Smollett hoax, and apparently Facebook censored it. Instagram is owned by Instagram is owned by Facebook. And basically, he heard from hundreds of his followers about having problems seeing, liking, or being able to interact with his posts. And many of them even claimed that they'd had to repeatedly refollow him because Instagram kept unfollowing people. I mean, that's just right out there, in your face. And it's a mess, and I'm wondering why Trump isn't doing anything about it. Because as things stand right now, if the social media had been this biased and controlling in 2016, Hillary would be in the White House. And the fact that they're doing this right now is another indicator to me that she might step back on in, that she's at least thinking about it. Now, I know that there was recently a poll about potential Democratic nominees in 2020, and Hillary was on that list way, way down toward the bottom. And I've noticed that she's not on subsequent polls that they're running, which show Biden consistently in the lead here. But it is a problem. The American people need to be able to share information freely with each other about what's going on in the world of politics or the world of health or the world of anything else. And right now we can't. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Mayor Bill de Blasio is out there. He's one of this Democratic clown car full of potential 2020 nominees. He's off to a rocky start because yesterday he had an event up in Concord, New Hampshire. He wanted to hold a roundtable on mental health, and there was like about 20 people, including the 14 people sitting on the panel. There were 6 people in the audience, and there were also an additional 6 reporters. So he's not exactly pulling the crowd in. At some point, we're going to start seeing some dropouts. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand officially launches her 2020 presidential run with an announcement video hitting out at Trump as she declares, "Brave doesn't spread hate, cloud truth, or build a wall." We need that wall. We really do. Okay, we're going to grab a phone call here from Mark in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. How are you doing? I wanted to kind of address this censorship because this is, I never thought in my life I would see the kind of crap that they're pulling right now. I really don't. I mean, they arrest a 14-year-old kid for spreading a video. Really?
Yes.
I'll tell you what's been done to me. They've totally, my old Facebook pages are gone. I mean, I didn't even get a chance to do nothing. They just poofed them. I do a lot of work with a ministry that we give money to. They go to these slave auctions in the Middle East, mainly in Pakistan, and they buy these young kids that are, being auctioned off, and then they smuggle them out and get them west where they're, no longer going to be victims of this crap.
Well, that's a very noble thing to do, and I applaud you.
Well, but I mean, I'd like to post that stuff because there are other people that, it's not one of those deals where you put a lot of money in, you maybe $20 a week or something, and I mean, they poof them every time. They just totally make them disappear. I don't understand what there's a bias. I'm a Christian. I don't force my beliefs on anybody else, but I really do see an anti-Christian bias by Facebook.
Yeah. Well, we're not just Facebook. I mean, the corporate media. I mean, this New Zealand tragedy is getting a lot of play all over the world. But I think it was just last week there was an incident where a whole bunch of Christians, something like 20 or 30 of them, got killed, and it scarcely got a mention.
Yeah, in 7 days it's been 120 now. I can't keep up on that stuff.
Okay.
With a persecuted church. And I know you're not a Christian. Definitely not going to try to convince you otherwise. But if you, maybe, I don't think you do Facebook either, but you can get on websites called the persecuted church and stuff, and they kind of keep up on that stuff. And yeah, it's definitely biased. I find it to be disgusting. Now if I were a transsexual with one leg who wore a dress everywhere I went, now that's good news. But trying to save kids from the auction block, that's not good news. That's something that needs to be banned. I don't understand the thinking. It's like I told my girlfriend. She kind of has a similar belief system to you. That Satan is the king of this world, and there's a lot of people helping him out.
Yeah. Well, the reason that they may not be covering the slave auctions in Pakistan is at least nominally a U.S. ally. And the media doesn't say bad things about U.S. allies. There's a lot of stuff going on in Saudi Arabia that would shock Americans. But because Saudi Arabia is our friend, it doesn't get reported. They report when the bad stuff happens in countries we don't like or plan to attack, then it'll get headline treatment.
Egypt and Libya are also having very similar problems. They're running thousands of people across those slave blocks. Slavery is just really, in my book, a really bad thing, especially when there's kids involved.
I agree, because you have to wonder who would buy a child slave, and I imagine probably for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and I don't understand. I don't know how you can force a company like Facebook to be impartial, or Twitter. I deleted my Twitter account finally after they banned Alex Jones. I do keep my Facebook because it's how I keep in contact with family members, with the family I had left. But I don't see how you could force them. There's maybe an Internet Bill of Rights of some sort where there's a First Amendment involved. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure it's a First Amendment issue. It's a question of, who's controlling the flow of information and for what reasons. Usually it's political or monetary. But there's a lot of evil going on in the world right now. And
yes,
it's very sad to see, and you have to wonder what's happening to our civilization. Are we, in fact, descending into a new dark age?
I firmly believe that. I do. There's just, like you said, evil. And I know you're an atheist, but you recognize there is good and evil, I think, in this world.
Oh, yeah, no question. No question about it.
Yeah, I think at one point we were good. We were a good, decent society as far as Americans go. And they flipped it. They flipped it just like a pancake. What's good is evil, and what's evil is good.
Yep. It is.
All right, my friend, I appreciate you taking my call.
You're welcome. It's a tragedy to watch it happen, and I've mentioned many times over my 60-plus years, I've watched this country deteriorate, and it's like watching a beloved family member succumbing to a slow disease that has no cure. And it's just a tragedy, and it's a heartbreak. It really is. Okay, Democratic candidate for president and establishment punching bag, Tulsi Gabbard is taking heat on Twitter for daring to suggest that the Russiagate scandal could be pushing the U.S. and Russia toward a dangerous new Cold War. Yeah, absolutely. So Gabbard is saying calling Trump a Putin puppet is dangerous and stupid, and immediately people on Twitter were saying, well, Tulsi Gabbard is a Putin puppet. That's the only possible reason she could be defending Donald Trump, because, those puppets, they stick together here. But we're seeing the tensions being fanned up. And we're in a new Cold War. And the big question is, how do we keep it from going hot? Boy, do you remember when the Soviet Union collapsed and everybody thought, wow, this is going to be a golden time. There's going to be a peace dividend. We don't have to spend all that money on weapons of war any longer. We can spend it on the roads and the schools and the hospitals and the dams. And the military-industrial complex, oh, no, no, no. They didn't want to give up that money. So we've had conflict all around the world ever since, and now we're back to sneering at the Chinese and the Russians. Okay, a former member of the Federal Election Commission has called for an investigation into alleged campaign finance violations by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her top aide, Saikat Chakrabarti. And the Daily Caller News Foundation reported last week that Ocasio-Cortez and Chakrabarti have since December of 2017 held legal authority over Justice Democrats, the outside PAC that has been credited with manufacturing her upset primary victory over incumbent Democrat Joe Crowley in June of last year. So the Conservative National Legal and Policy Center also filed an FEC complaint this week. So she may be in a little bit of trouble for that. Now, here's another revelation here. Ocasio-Cortez Green New Deal. Huzzah, huzzah. It's a wonderful, modern, forward-thinking plan. Actually, no. It turns out that her Green New Deal was copied from a 2009 United Nations Environment Program report. So, the Green New Deal is not a new movement of the people, but a crafty creation of a small group of global elite working through the United Nations. I'm starting to like Lindsey Graham again. He wants to know whether the Department of Justice literally plotted a coup against Trump. And he sent out an open letter last Friday requesting documents related to an alleged discussion between senior officials about removing President Donald Trump. And, of course, you know, Trump is always at odds with senior federal officials. They've got this investigation into him that's been ongoing for a long time here. But apparently, the Department of Justice officials at one time discussed whether they should remove him from office. And Lindsey Graham wants to know just how that conversation went down. Now, I don't know how well the conversation was documented, if there was a transcript or if there were notes. Frankly, it sounds like the kind of thing where you'd step out of the building and you'd go down to the bar and grill at the end of the street into a back booth and have that kind of a talk. But I know Lindsey Graham's going to get a fight. They're not going to want to talk to him about any of this stuff. He may have to basically launch an investigation and put them all under oath. Okay, Republican leaders in the House of Representatives gathered outside the Capitol building on Wednesday to announce the party's new strategy to bring anti-infanticide legislation to the floor after House Democrats rejected a vote 17 times. If you want a picture of the Democratic Party, there it is, aborting a baby right at the moment of birth. They're all on board with this. We've had a number of states passed virtually identical bills saying the same thing, that babies can be aborted right up to the moment of birth. And I think that's just absolutely horrific. Now, Beto O'Rourke is out there and he broke the one-day fundraising record, beating all of his Democratic rivals. Pulled in quite a bit of cash here. But Beto has some skeletons in his closet because it turns out that in his youth, he was a member of a hacker group, a notorious hacker group known as the Cult of the Dead Cow. They've been around for a very, very long time, and he was a member of this hacking group. And apparently, Reuters had the story. And they sat on it until after the Senate race. So, again, politics and corruption. Apparently, Beto, when he was 26-year-old, had a DWI, and apparently the GOP got his mugshot, and they used it as an illustration for an ad, "Drink responsibly on St. Patrick's Day." And of course, the Democrats are out there saying, well, you're peddling anti-Irish stereotypes by posting Beto O'Rourke's mugshot. All right. Here's an interesting situation. Somebody actually did a study ranking the intolerance of various counties. And surprisingly, it turns out the most intolerant county is not down in the deep south. It's actually up in Massachusetts. And 95% of the residents identify as Democrats. Okay, so let's talk about the economic news here. We have had two of the greatest bull markets in U.S. history, but why are the boomers so broke? And this is coming from Jeff Desjardins, a visual capitalist. And he wrote in this post saying, while it's true that putting your money on the line is never easy, the historical record of the stock market is virtually irrefutable. U.S. markets have consistently performed over long holding periods, even going back to the 19th century. And so part of the problem may be that young millennials, baby boomers, have been caught up in this day trading, where they're buying and selling and trying to flip the stocks and ride the spread. And they can wind up, basically with an even return or zero return. The other problem, of course, is the market itself is being rigged, and they're using market forces to drive the prices of the stocks up, but not their value, not their dividends. So it's another place where things are being rigged. Okay, India is mulling rupee payments to continue purchasing Venezuelan oil. India's Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has advised private refiners, Reliance Industry, and Nayara Energy to avoid making payment for Venezuelan crude imports through channels that are likely to be impacted by U.S. sanctions. And so they're getting ready to set up, it's still in the initial stage, but they're getting ready to set up a trading system based on the rupee. And this is what's happening all over the world. The more the United States weaponizes the dollar, the more people are going to turn away from it. Right now, the United States economy is dependent on the world using the US dollar for a small interest charge. And yet they're engaged in policies that are driving people away from the dollar. The de-dollarization of the world is continuing. And we can all see in the long run where this is headed. There's going to be a dollar crash. Okay, Donald Trump apparently got on the phone with General Motors CEO demanding that General Motors reopen the Ohio auto plant, which laid off 1,700 workers. And apparently it was a heated phone call. And there were also a lot of tweets on Saturday and Sunday. And the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, is saying, it's the United Auto Workers Union. It just makes it too expensive. And Trump said, I don't care, just get it open. That's not really a good way to be a leader. A good leader is more of a salesman than anything else. You got to persuade. You got to find a solution. Whatever happened to win-win? Now, I know a lot of people are very angry with General Motors because they got bailed out at taxpayer expense and then turned around and started closing the factories. Okay, we've got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting into the issue of immigration. Apparently, the health care costs for the illegal aliens in ICE custody are running $250 million annually, every single year, to provide medical, dental, mental health care for illegal aliens and border crossers. And to me, this is obscene for two reasons. One, why is the United States government obliged to provide dental and mental health care for illegal aliens? I understand in the case of contagious diseases that something has to be done. And where is the free medical and dental and mental health care for some of our homeless veterans? It seems like the government's priorities are really, really messed up on that one. Another little story. This one is coming from spiritualvigor.com. Family begs for justice after illegal immigrant decapitates son in hit and run. And it's another argument for building the wall. The family of a man who was struck and killed by an illegal alien in September watched as the alien was sentenced Friday to up to 33 months in prison for a hit and run causing death. I think it should be for a lot longer. I think he should be deported. He should be deported. Okay, the latest monkey wrench in the gears of Brexit is that Italy is going to block a delay of Brexit. And Salvini plans Eurosceptic favor to Farage. So Mr. Brock, who's a close ally of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, insisted there were very different views across the EU over Theresa May's request to extend the bloc's Article 50 exit clause. But any Brexit delay will require a unanimous decision by all leaders at the European Council summit, which is going to be this Thursday. And it looks like Italy is going to vote it down. So it will happen. It will happen. Out here in Hawaii, this should have been up under economy. But we have this light rail system. And it is years behind schedule. It is billions over budget. It's just resulted in the roadways underneath where the track's going. They're full of potholes. We can't even drive on them. With Claire, her back gets sore. There's apparently a federal investigation of the rail project now. And as a result, rail invoices are not going to be paid until this mess gets sorted out, which means the entire project may come to a screeching halt. And frankly, there were a lot of people around here who were saying they doubted this thing was ever going to be completed. And we were going to be left with these very unsightly tracks all over the southern edge of the island. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And it's time to talk about the Boeing 737 MAX, because it's obvious there's a problem. And a team of French air crash investigators say they have found clear similarities between last week's Ethiopian Airlines crash and last October's Lion Air disaster. Both of these aircraft plunged nose first to their doom. And they're starting to get into the flight data recorder from the Ethiopian crash. And they're saying, based on the data, the actual data from the flight recorders, that there are clear similarities as to what was going on. So what happened here? Well, apparently it was flawed analysis and failed oversight. And Boeing and the FAA certified the suspect 737 MAX flight control system. And apparently part of the problem was that FAA managers pushed its engineers to delegate wide responsibility for assessing the safety of the 737 MAX to Boeing itself. In other words, the FAA is doing the same thing the FDA is doing. Oh, you pharmaceutical corporations, you can test your drugs yourself. Just send us a report. So Boeing was basically certifying the safety of their own systems. Safety engineers familiar with the documents show that the analysis included crucial flaws. Now, apparently, the system involved is the one that would automatically take control of the aircraft if the aircraft thought it was coming up on a stall. Now, we know from last October's crash, there were reports, or even Boeing said, the stall warning sensor on the outside of the plane was sending erroneous data. Why that didn't trigger a worldwide examination of these units and replacement, I don't know. It should have. But apparently this new flight control system, if it gets a signal that the plane is about to stall, it cranks up the engines to full speed and pushes the nose down. And that's exactly what happened. When the way an aircraft takes off, it's under manual control. Pilots will rotate the plane up. They'll get up to about 1,000 feet, get the gear up, get the flaps up, and at that point, they turn the flight over to the autopilot, which will continue to take the plane up to cruising altitude in theory. But apparently in both the Lion Air flight and the Ethiopian Airlines flight, the problems began just as the planes reached 1,000 feet, the point at which the pilots would have switched the autopilots on. Now, I did get an email from a pilot saying that it is possible to turn that system off, but apparently a big part of the problem is that a lot of these pilots who are flying the 737 MAX didn't really get trained on it. They're basically reassigned 737 pilots. And the thinking was, one 737 is just like another. But apparently in this case, these pilots were not being told about this new anti-stall system, which is called MCAS. So apparently there's a grand jury subpoena that's been issued to Boeing. They haven't responded to it yet, but apparently there are going to be issues. And the timing could not be worse for Boeing, because last week they unveiled their newest jetliner, the 777X. This is the longest passenger airliner in the world. And the debut was held on Friday at Boeing's facility near Seattle. But this plane is going to be longer and wider than the latest 747. I think we can call it the solid aluminum overcast. But Boeing's going to have trouble selling these things based on how this 737 MAX situation plays on out. All righty. Okay, so last week we had this huge scandal that broke where the ultra-wealthy were basically paying bribes to get their kids into these elite schools. Now, there's a legal way to do it. Apparently, Jared Kushner's father donated $2.5 million to Harvard, and then Jared Kushner was admitted to Harvard. That's technically considered legal. This other case that's coming on, apparently there were bribes to coaches to say we need to get this person in on a sports scholarship and various other things like that. The scandal is now going deeper because it turns out there is an entire underground industry where rich people can literally prop their kids up through their whole college experience. The whole system is rigged. And apparently there is this writer, Jamie Lay, and she wrote this piece which further exposes what's going on in American society. And the post has already been shared over 30,000 times, and it details her experience working for wealthy clients, writing papers, and doctoring resumes to ensure that lazy, entitled, rich kids get the right personal brand for Ivy League universities. And I even remember back when I was in college, it was sort of an open secret that if you had money, there were people who would write your term papers for you. So there are apparently some kids who had the smarts and had the qualifications to go to college and were aced out. Meanwhile, we've got a bunch of people who went through these prestige schools who didn't do their own homework, just basically sailed on through, got their prestige degree, and now they're in positions of power and authority. And that may go a long way to explaining why so much of the thinking coming out of Washington, D.C. is of such poor quality. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Well, apparently the Bundy case is back in the news yet again. And this is probably one of the few times I've agreed with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, because they have rebuffed the U.S. government's attempt to appeal a district judge's decision to throw out the case on the grounds of prosecutorial misconduct. Now, frankly, I think cooler heads would say, all right, we blew this one. Let's just, retire from the field with as much dignity as we can and let this pass into history. But apparently, the prosecutors want to come on back. They want their pound of flesh, because Bundy made the government look bad back in 2014 by standing for his rights and the rule of law. Turning toward political correctness here, story out of stationgossip.com. Apparently, at the end of February, a school in Arlington, Virginia, an elementary school, had a kindergarten sit on the floor to hear a transgender spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign read them a book in which the claim is made that a boy can have a girl brain but a boy body, or a boy brain and a girl body. And the parents were outraged, and the school district claimed that the parents were notified by a letter ahead of time and were allowed to opt out. But apparently some of the people still had the letter, and the letter basically was very vague about the event that was going to happen, and did not, in fact, offer a way to opt out. And the letter did admit that a book written by a transgender person would be read to the class. It did not explicitly say that kindergartners will be told they may have a girl brain and a boy body, or a boy brain and a girl body. Nor did it say that the kids would be read to by a cross-dressing man who calls himself Sarah. The letter simply said there will be discussion around the big ideas of the books which we want to accept and welcome all people. It's indoctrination. These kids are even too young to know what they're hearing, but it's being crammed down their throat here. Over in Columbus, Ohio, this is from the Stinky Badges category. A Columbus police officer is facing federal charges for depriving victims of their constitutional rights. This is a vice officer. And what he did is he was kidnapping his victims under the guise of them being under arrest, and then forcing them to engage in sex for their freedom. So he faces 3 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 2 counts of witness tampering, 1 count witness tampering. I wonder why that is separate. 1 count of making false statements. So apparently this guy was accused of kidnapping 3 different victims, taking them to another location, and forcing them to engage in sex acts in order to be released. What is going wrong in our culture, in our society? And again, I'm wondering if this guy was on prescription antidepressants. Turning to the world of computers here, there's a new mail spam campaign that contains an attachment that, when executed, will install a Windows clipboard hijacker that attempts to steal bitcoins from its victims. It's not enough that they're using your computers to mine bitcoins, now they just want to steal them. The new campaign was discovered by security site My Online Security, who received a series of Bitcoin investment-related emails. These emails had a subject line that included "Forward, Review BTC," or "Forward, Review Your New Bitcoin International Investment Update 2019," and contained an archive attachment. So you got to keep an eye out for that one. And taking advantage of the horrible tragedy, there's another malspam campaign that is trying to utilize the tragic Boeing 737 MAX crashes in order to spread malware on a recipient's computer. Now, these spam emails pretend to be leaked documents about imminent crashes that the sender states should be reviewed and shared with loved ones to warn them. This campaign was discovered by 360 Threat Intelligence Center, a research division of 360 Enterprise Security Group, who has posted about them on Twitter. Now, the emails are coming from the same email address, info@isquick.com, spelled GEC, isquec.com, and have subject lines similar to Forward Airlines plane crash Boeing 737 MAX 8. They also contain a jar file as an attachment with names similar to MP4 14 2019 jar. It's just crazy out there. It's just absolutely crazy out there, and nothing is being done. The American Automobile Association recently ran a poll, and the subject was about self-driving cars, and they discovered most Americans have a negative impression, almost 3/4. Apparently, public trust in autonomous vehicles has declined by 11 points over the last year. And apparently it's because there have been some high-profile incidents involving self-driving vehicles or the testing of them. Last May, a driverless Uber hit and killed an Arizona woman crossing the street. And even though it's incredibly rare, crashes like this have changed perceptions nationwide. In Maryland, drivers have serious doubts about letting a computer take the wheel. I can understand that feeling. The real question is going to be, yes, there will be accidents with the autonomous cars. Are there going to be more accidents with the autonomous cars versus driven cars, or will there be less accidents with the autonomous cars? I mean, we accept the accidents that we have with our current driven cars. It's a fact of life. Somebody slammed their truck into a tree out in front of our condo here about a month ago. I think it was a suicide attempt. We just sort of accept that's part of the price of having the availability of the automobiles. But I'm in agreement. I don't like the idea of the car driving itself, especially around here with all the Papuli drivers. Driving here used to be fun. Now the roads are crowded, they're in poor condition. Much less aloha out there, much more road rage. Everybody speeds, nobody uses their turn signals. It's really not a lot of fun here. Okay, apparently police departments are starting to come on out with an app for smartphones. There's an app for that. And it's basically, it goes by varieties of names, but it's all about report your neighbor. And they're proliferating. There's no oversight. There's no community input. And basically this means that a coworker, a resentful ex-husband, or that woman with the yappy Pomeranian who thinks you take too many photos at the dog park, they can use their cell phone to drop a dime on you, which would mean the local police department might say that your afternoon stroll needs more investigation. This is sort of the cell phone version of see something, say something. But if this system does not record who is sending in the tips, then it's wide open for abuse. It is definitely wide open for abuse. Okay, apparently 82% of European Union government websites are stalked by Google ad tech cookies. Ad tech trackers were found on 25 of the 28 member states' sites, with only Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands clean of commercial cookies. There were 52 companies identified on France's government sites, 27 on Latvia's, and 19 on Belgium's. It's a public disgrace. It is a public disgrace. Okay, for you crypto fans out there, apparently The British Signals Intelligence Agency, GCHQ, which is celebrating its centenary, they have released emulators for famed World War II era cipher machines that can be run within its web-based educational encryption app, CyberChef. And they basically have released emulators for Bomb, Enigma, and Typex, if you feel like playing with them. And apparently they tested these emulators against the real thing, and they are very, very accurate. So, now speaking of snooping and possible abuse here, as you know, Great Britain is getting ready to institute a porn ban in which you will literally have to get the government's permission to look at naughty parts, naughty bits. And the concern is being raised that hackers could get into the information and use it to blackmail people. I know you're looking at porn. I got your paperwork here from the Porn Bureau. And I understand the age verification procedure, but how much data is being collected? I mean, are they going to track your porn usage? I mean, because apparently, every time you go to look at a porn site, you're going to have to plug in some kind of a number or an ID, password. Are they going to be keeping track of your sexual fantasies? Boy, talk about hackers getting hold of that. That would be pretty, pretty ugly. Okay. Apparently, there is a call center in India that is faking calls to Britons, claiming to be from the tax department and threatening them with prison if they don't pay immediately. Apparently, they're calling 10,000 Britons a day. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently, there's now a criminal investigation being opened against Boeing regarding the 737 MAX. And I think the reason for that is very obvious in that last October, following the crash of Lion Air, more should have been done to make sure that it wasn't a systemic issue. And I think Boeing's attitude was, oh, well, pilot fault, inexperienced pilot, couldn't possibly happen again, and now it has. And the French aviation authorities are looking at the flight data recorders and saying, there's no question, these are similar. And apparently a lot of it stems out of the fact that Boeing wanted to create a jet to compete for a specific market niche, but they didn't want to spend the money to build one from the ground up. And so they took the 737 airframe, which is a good airframe. Let's be honest about that. And then they slapped on these new, larger, more efficient engines, which created a bit of a problem because the wings on the 737 are very low to the ground. So to deal with that, they pushed the engines forward and slightly outboard, and they put on a longer nose gear so that the engines would have clearance. And there are some people out there saying that it makes the plane very unstable. I tend to disagree, because if anything, moving those engines forward is going to put your center of gravity even further ahead of the center of lift, and that's going to actually increase the longitudinal stability of the airframe. In any event, people right now seem to be looking more at that MCAS as the cause of the problem. Boeing has already come out with a software patch. Canada is saying they're going to certify it. Canada's ready to put those 737 MAXs back in the air. I hope it's not premature. But there's a lot of money on the line here, and unfortunately that seems to drive policy for so many countries these days. Okay, over in Kiev, there was this procession of worshippers of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarch, and it took place in Kiev. And it was in honor of a holiday of Orthodoxy, which ends the first week of Great Lent, and more than 2,000 Kievians took part. But the critical feature of this year's procession was the public redeclaration of the anathema against the Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, his moves against the church, which have resulted in the current schism. And we understand schisms. We saw a lot of that with the recent Methodist conference over the issue of gay wedding. All right. If you have ground turkey in your freezer, you may want to check it, because there's been a recall of 78,000 pounds. And apparently it was sold all the way in last July, which means a lot of it's already been eaten. But they're recalling it right now. It's produced by Butterball LLC in Mount Olive, North Carolina. It's sold under several brand names, including Butterball, Kroger, and Food Lion. And the meat is being recalled due to fears that the products may be contaminated with salmonella, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service. Apparently, some people got sick after eating the turkey. Here's my issue. This turkey's been out there since July. If it was really contaminated with salmonella, I think a lot more people would be very, very ill. All right, out in California, remember the Oroville Dam? Back in 2017, huge, high levels of water overtopped the dam and basically destroyed the spillway. And they spent $1.1 billion to repair it. And apparently, according to National Dam expert Scott Cahill of Watershed Services of Ohio, Oroville Dam is back on the same failure track as 2017, with visible water seepage trickling from the foot of the dam and dozens of points along the dam's principal spillway. Cahill warns that warming temperatures magnified by precipitation is a growing threat to the dam. And as a matter of fact, there is massive flooding starting to take place all over the United States, because all of that snow from this last hard winter, all that snow that we were told would be a thing of the past, it's now melting. And it's pouring into the streams and rivers. There's massive flooding all along the Mississippi Basin. And it's already overtopped some of the levees. All right. Okay, Dustin mentioned this before, but Russia has deployed strategic bombers and Iskander missile systems to Crimea to counter the U.S. anti-missile... Oh, we got to take a break for commercial. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And again, Dustin mentioned this when he called, but here are the details. Russia is deploying Tu-22 M3 bombers and Iskander missiles to Crimea. This is in response to the U.S. deployment of anti-missile systems in Romania. We're right back to the same thing the Cold War was all about. More weapons here, more weapons there, more weapons here, more weapons there. And of course, it was the U.S. placing of nuclear missiles in Turkey, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So they're arming up. Everybody is just arming on up here. Okay. Probably a lot of you could be forgiven if you didn't remember that we actually have a war going on in Somalia still. And apparently there's been an increase in airstrikes against targets in Somalia, theoretically targeting the Al-Shabaab terrorist organization. So all these different wars, my goodness here. Over in France, the government has announced in the wake of these last Yellow Vest protests, which went violent, that France will ban the Yellow Vest protests if violent groups take part. So France's prime minister said Paris police chief had been sacked and the government would shut down the Yellow Vest protests if violent groups were identified among the ranks of the Yellow Vest protesters. You know, like the violent groups that are actually working for the French government to justify the crackdown, which can happen. Okay, time is running out on U.S. opposition to the Nord Stream 2. And it actually is a major setback because the Nord Stream 2 pipeline represents the last stand of U.S. influence over the internal affairs of Europe. And Europe is now breaking free of U.S. influence. The rest of the world is moving away. They're moving away from the dollar. They're refusing to give in to U.S. bullying. They recognize that we have an empire in decline. And they're just waiting for the crash. All right, here's an interesting little story. And you have to wonder how people even have the nerve to do this. Down in Virginia, there was this 19-year-old Virginia woman, and her name is Sarah Wilson. She was a passenger in her boyfriend's car when they were pulled over by Chesapeake police. This actually happened all the way back in July of 2018. And the officers arrested both Wilson and her boyfriend, 27-year-old Holden Medlin, and handcuffed her with her hands behind her back and put her in the patrol car. Now, Medlin allegedly resisted arrest and tried to flee, at which point officers supposedly left Sarah Wilson to deal with him. And when she came back, she was dead. And according to the Chesapeake police spokesman, the coroner is saying that Sarah Wilson allegedly took a gun out of the car, contorted her body, and shot herself in the mouth with her hands handcuffed behind her back. Well, this would be a good time to look at the police body camera, but golly gee whiz, apparently one of the officers had been wearing a body cam, but it was knocked offline during the struggle. I'm not buying this one tiny bit. I am not buying this one tiny bit here. Okay, MySpace. Here's a big whoopsie. MySpace is a social networking company. They were popular in the early 2000s. I actually didn't even realize they were still around. But apparently they were doing a server migration, and they lost about 50 million songs that were uploaded to the platform by 14 million artists between 2005 and 2015, as well as a whole bunch of other files. And so the LA-based company issued a statement Monday saying, as a result of the server migration project, any photos, videos, and audio files you uploaded more than 3 years ago may no longer be available on or from MySpace. We apologize for the inconvenience. And some users, including American technologist and blogger Andy Bao, have questioned whether the data loss was an accident in the first place. And he said, I'm deeply skeptical this was an accident. Flagrant incompetence may be bad PR, but it still sounds better than we can't be bothered with the effort and cost of migrating and hosting 50 million old MP3s. He has a valid point there. I guess it would depend on, MySpace's profitability. I mean, these days, high-capacity hard drives are very inexpensive. Back when I was working on Final Fantasy, we had something like this happen. And we had this system set up where our local desktop workstations were basically operating as remotes, and all of the actual data, the animation files, the textures, and all the rest of it were kept on a centralized server. And the server had to be upgraded. And somebody did something the wrong way, and when the new servers came back on, everything was gone. The backup they thought they'd made of the old server was apparently of the new server, and it was just wiped out. It set us back by quite a bit. Fortunately, not being one to trust others, I had a little, what was called a zip drive. It was sort of an oversized floppy drive, would hold about 100 megabytes, and I had it in my office, and I used it to make my own local copies of all my textures and animation files. So all I had to do was throw it back in there and fire up the rendering engine and get back online there. Okay. Boy, this is really getting ugly here. I'm talking about New Zealand. Zero Hedge and Live Leak are now blocked. Sharers are being warned of jail as New Zealand censors crack down on the mosque attack video. What is in that? What are they so afraid of? And apparently, the actual statement from the police via the local news source: do not download it, do not share it. If you are found to have a copy of the video or to have shared it, you face fines and potential imprisonment. Boy, they want that to go away. This is looking more and more like this was staged. This was set up. And that there's something on that video. They're afraid that people are going to look at it and say, this doesn't make sense. I mean, there is much more violent stuff out there on the internet. Like I said, look, the U.S. and NATO, they live stream all their mass murders. We've all seen, the little video of the bomb and drone strikes blowing up buildings full of people. Nobody gets upset if we download those or share those, not that I would. But that is really serious, serious stuff. And apparently New Zealand is now blocking certain platforms. They are afraid. 10 years in jail. Apparently, it's 14 years in jail if you are found to be a dealer of the video. Yeah, there is something going on there. Okay, let's see. No callers on the line. So, right now, we have a problem in this country, and it's the credit cards, which unfortunately, as the economy has tightened, people have started literally living on their credit cards, which is always a bad move, if you can find any way to avoid it. And right now, millions can't pay their debt. And so we're looking at this huge consumer debt cyclone that is getting ready to really unwind. Frankly, the indicators are out there saying that, yeah, we're going into a recession. There are going to be some problems. Why is the price of gold and silver still not going up? I mean, it just looks like virtually every aspect of the economy is being rigged, is being controlled. Not for your benefit, not for my benefit, but for the benefit of Wall Street and the bankers. It's just all a gigantic fraud. Okay. Okay, I need some phone calls if some people could call on in. I got 15 minutes to fill. And I literally have run out of things to on my talking points list. Reminds me of that old Bob Newhart bit about doing talk radio, and he says, dead burnt babies, I'm for them. Okay, let's see. Anybody has shared something. All right, so let's get on back here to some of our domestic politics, because we need to keep our focus on that. The corporate media wants us all focused on New Zealand and how shocking it is that New Zealand is going to throw people in jail for 10 years just for showing the video. But the real news that we need to be paying attention to are all these bits and pieces coming out from testimony about how there really is a deep state and how it's been working since day one to undermine Donald Trump. And that's not how this country is supposed to operate. Now, I get a lot of emails saying, well, if you don't like Donald Trump, you shouldn't be supporting and protecting him. I'm not supporting and protecting Donald Trump per se. I am concerned about preserving the process, our constitutional republic, which is being taken apart. And we've got all these people out there screaming, socialism is wonderful, socialism is wonderful. No, it isn't. Denmark just collapsed. Finland is on the verge of collapse. Socialism only works if you've got lots and lots of other people's money. No economy is going to work, whether it's fascist, capitalist, or socialist, if you don't have jobs for all your people, if you don't have gainful employment that is manufacturing products for sale or agricultural produce for sale. You can't have everybody just sitting around getting a free check from the government. It's not going to hold together. All right, we do have a caller, Alan in North Dakota. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Some time ago, you mentioned that there was a man that had about, I think, 20,000 acres of organic farming. He was going to add 10,000 more or something like that.
Yeah.
Can I find it on whatreallyhappened.com?
No, that was actually a phone call into the show. And
okay.
Basically, but I mean, you can do a web search for organic farming. Basically, organic farming means going back to farming the way I knew it as a kid. Where you're using natural fertilizers, and you know what I mean by that, and you're avoiding all those chemicals, because there are actually natural ways of pest control, and of course the companies like Dow Chemical or Monsanto don't want you to realize that there are things you can put onto the soil of your garden to keep slugs and snails away, there are natural ways of dealing with all of this. But of course, the goal is to sell the chemicals. Those chemicals are the parts that are dangerous. And if you're organic farming, you don't use any of them. Now, I think one of the things we talked about last week is that the USDA certified organic label is itself compromised, because it doesn't mean that the food is actually organic. It basically means that there's a limited amount of the non-organic chemicals allowed inside it.
Do you remember what state that was, by chance?
I think that was up possibly in Montana, but I don't really remember.
Okay. Yeah, I was in Montana, been in Montana for 10 years or so, but I'm in North Dakota now, and yeah, it's just a lot of inorganic farming, as it were, around here. It's just the corporations are taking over. The small family farms are disappearing, and farming, as I knew it, is disappearing. And again, it's being done recklessly. They're actually poisoning the topsoil with all the chemicals that they're using. One of the things that you're doing with organic farming is that you're working with the topsoil to keep the system going, rather than, just flooding it with all these chemicals. And then, of course, the chemicals run off if you're irrigating. They get into the drainage system, and they wind up places where they really ought not to be. Absolutely. Well, Michael, thank you very much. I enjoy your show.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Tim in Chicago. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Lost Tim. He might be calling.
We lost Tim. All right, let's go back to Raleigh in Minnesota. Aloha, Raleigh. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, great show. I was giving you a call about the fallout of what's going on in New Zealand. A lot of my friends have told me that have been messaging back and forth trying to get intel from different countries are worried about the fallout of what's going to happen with New Zealand. Basically want to become apolitical and pretty much just store up their food and get ready for this coming collapse of the USSA.
Well, I don't think
the shooting in New Zealand is going to have that much of an actual logistical impact on the United States of America. But it is certainly being fanned up as a media distraction. So that people aren't looking at all the protests in the streets. They're not looking at all the wars. They're not looking at all the suffering and death that's going on. And we may be in an age where corporate media is just going to be in the business of producing one spectacular hoax story after the next, to keep us all, looking at them and befuddled, sort of like, bread and circuses.
I've been fasting, and it's like created so much clarity with myself. And like I told you earlier, I've been using it to actually.
Okay, we're going to have to let you go because we got to take a break for commercials. We got one more caller that we're going to take, and we'll be back with the last segment of today's program. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. And before we take this next phone call, this story is just now coming on in. It's back to New Zealand. There was a lot of applause over the fact that this special armed tactical unit was able to get to the Al Noor Mosque just 4 minutes after the first officers. Well, it turns out that this unit just happened to be in a training session nearby, already suited up with all their tactical gear. What an amazing coincidence, and how lucky for them. So anyway, let's take a phone call from Tom in Connecticut. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just a quick comment about guaranteed income, the big buzz for guaranteed income, give everybody money so they can spend it into the economy.
Yes.
I ran into a fellow in Florida who has been working, he worked in casinos, Atlantic City, then he moved down to Florida. And all the casinos in Florida are owned by the Seminole Indian tribe.
Yeah.
And because of there's only, I think there's barely 4,500 Seminole Indians in the whole left that qualify.
Yes.
So for the people that don't work in the casinos, they receive this insane amount of money. I believe it's like $10,000 per family member per month. It's an obscene amount of money. And what do you think the biggest problem for the Seminole Indian elders is?
I'm going to take a wild guess and say alcoholism.
Alcoholism, drug addiction, dysfunction. These people don't know what to do. All this money's pouring in, and they just sit around all day, and they're all... He had a meeting, really, and he was, when he first heard about this, he was staggered. He just goes like, well, what? And the biggest problem they have is trying to find these and give these people some kind of purpose in life.
Yeah, that can be a real hard thing to... Actually, for people who have been, struggling for much of their life, to all of a sudden come into a great amount of wealth can seriously mess them up. We've seen that all in Hollywood, where you've got actors who've struggled with their career, and all of a sudden they hit it big, and they've got all kinds of money, and it just messes with their heads. Now, I don't think that would happen to me, but I welcome the opportunity to find out.
Well, I'm in that category also. But Jordan Peterson speaks to this also about the worst that can happen was he makes a very, very strong correlation to IQs also. Very compelling stuff to listen to.
All right. Well, Tom, listen, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to try and squeeze one final phone call in here before the end of the show. Michael in Canada, spit it out.
All right, Michael, I'll make this quick. That law the Congress passed, anti-Semitic law, and you were saying they had to add this and add that, and I seen a list of the people, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Mexicans, and there was a bit more, but there was never a mention of Christians or white people.
Yeah, you noticed that. Yeah, okay. Michael, got to let you go. It's the end of the show here. Thanks for calling in and helping me fill time. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Without you, we will not be here.
So have a good afternoon, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.